About long-tail macaques, monkey communication. We're actually going to dive in a little bit on language and communication, how monkeys talk to each other. I hate air quotes, but here we go. So when we think of communication, it's actually something very interesting to conceptualize because we do so many different ways of communication as human beings. We have verbal, nonverbal ways. We have written communication, sounds that are not necessarily language that are used in communication. And this is not inherently different than long-tail macaques or monkeys in general. I'm going to focus on long-tail macaques, which means that their language set, their communications are based on the fact that they are diurnal animals, meaning that they have a night cycle and a day cycle, and they range during the day and they sleep at night, much like human beings do. And because of that, their language is based in part on the fact that what they are doing mostly happens during the daytime. So when people think of monkey communication, they think of the screeching and the squeaks and the calls that the monkeys make. And that's actually, I mean, there's some truth to that. The monkeys have different vocalizations that they use at different times to deal with situations that are happening. And a good example of that is when they perceive danger. So if there's a big snake or a large crocodile or even a monitor lizard, in the area, or even people, depending on how the people are behaving. The macaque troop will start alarm calling, and they kind of make this loud eep, 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 sort of a sound, and it kind of gradually gets louder. And if it's taken by certain individuals in the troop reacts to it. So that's the first thing I want to talk about is the alarm call. And the thing about the alarm call is there is a component of that is based on who is making the calls. So for example, if you have a alarm call that's being made by the troop leader, the alpha male, if he starts making an alarm call, the entire troop's going to react to that. They're going to flee arboreally. They're going to go up in the trees and they're going to get away from danger. But at the same time, you can hear alarm calls that are made by juvenile monkeys. So these are your not infants, but not quite adult yet, little kid monkeys. And sometimes they're playing around and they're making alarm calls just to create a little bit of a shenanigans. It's like a prank that they're doing. And when you hear a juvenile make an alarm call, you don't necessarily see the whole troop react to that. So you might see them kind of perk up and listen more, and then they'll determine as a group whether or not this is actually an alarm worth reacting to. And I'm going to say a quick hello to everybody, but I want to continue forward because I don't want to go too long on this. So yeah, it depends on who's making the alarm calls. And then also within that, where the location is of the individual troop members making alarm calls. So that's one example of communication. But they also do a lot of non-verbal communication. And this is something that people can understand because we all use non-verbal communication. I'm actually hearing impaired. I'm mostly deaf. And I learned something through the process of losing my hearing, which was that human beings actually rely 30% of the time on watching the lips form the words to understand what people are saying. So lip reading is actually inherently built into us. And there's a layer of that goes across all primates. So when we think about long-tail macaques and nonverbal communication, that is a huge component of how they talk to each other. And nonverbal communication for macaques works like this. For instance, if you have a macaque that is sitting and doesn't want to be bothered, and all of a sudden the young monkeys, the juveniles, are running around and they accidentally brush up against this macaque, that macaque is going to give them a look. He's going to pull a face, and that face might include open mouth, kind of which in monkey speak is a short warning. Hey, you're getting on my nerves, Things that monkeys do that people don't do, or vice versa, is monkeys take great offense to you staring directly in their eyes. It's a very threatening thing, and especially with a long-tailed macaque, it means that you are intent on doing something hazardous to that monkey. You're a danger to them if you're staring at them, which is actually why a lot of people end up getting bit when they go to these parks where there are hundreds of monkeys. They just don't understand monkey culture and end up staring in their eyes, which is aggressive. And in monkey speak, they avoid that. So when they want to look at each other, they actually sit in close proximity and they kind of glance a little bit at each other. They never stare directly at each other. And the more they do that, if you see a monkey that's sitting kind of side to side and glancing at another monkey without touching them, these monkeys are actually in a very friendly situation. You know, they're not aggressive with each other. The other way that they'll use nonverbal communication is in yawning. Now, for a human being, if you see a person go, you know, they're sleepy or whatever. But if you see that in a long-tailed macaque, it depends on what the situation is. They may be sleepy. If their eyes are closed and they're yawning, they may be sleepy. But 9 times out of 10, if they do a big yawn, they're actually showing you the weapons that are built into their mouth. They're showing you their fangs, their big teeth, and that's a warning sign. That is actually a very key warning sign saying, hey, I'm not comfortable with what you're doing or your proximity, and I need you to stop doing it or leave. And they're showing you what's going to happen if you don't do that. So they're kind of saying, hey, I've got these big teeth. If you don't leave, I'm going to use them. And people kind of misread that too. They always say, oh, that monkey's tired or whatever. No, not tired, especially if the monkey ends up looking at you during the course of that yawn. It's an extreme aggravated situation, and they are absolutely giving you the last chance to get out of there and to not become physically violent with you. So that's all kind of key components of that. But it's very interesting when we think about long-tailed macaques because people don't really see them as being very cognitive, but they are actually pretty aware of a lot of things. They have a good memory for people and materials that are good to them or bad to them. So, for example, when I go to do my observations, they don't pay a lot of attention to me, but at the same time, they never react aggressively around me, even if they're acting aggressive to other people that are in the area. And this is because they do not see me as a threatening figure, and they do not see me as somebody that's going to give them food. They do not see me as somebody who's interesting in any way because I've been there for 3 years and they're kind of just bored with me. But a lot of what I had to do to gain their trust and habituate them to me was based on nonverbal communication. So like I said, I don't stare directly at the monkeys. I don't encroach on their space. If they start to give me warning signs, I'm very careful to go ahead and kind of shrug my shoulders down and make myself less imposing. I mean, I'm 6 feet tall and they're like 1.5 feet tall, but you know, I do what I can and I move away from them. I never run. I never turn my back on them. That's an important thing if you want to understand monkey behavior. You kind of want to keep them in your peripheral vision because when you're dealing with an aggressive monkey, if you ever deal with an aggressive monkey, I can guarantee you're not dealing with one monkey. They live in troops of between 20 and 50 monkeys per troop. And if one monkey gets into an altercation with a human being or a larger animal like a dog or whatever, it is never a one-on-one fight. It is always going to de-evolve into half the troop against the one animal. So people will be well advised to follow a certain sort of etiquette around monkeys. But getting back to the whole premise of communication, so what are they communicating for? As I said early on, they communicate a lot for danger, but they also communicate a lot for interesting things that they find. So they do have sort of vocalizations and ways of posturing their bodies that convey a message that, hey, there's food over here or there's something interesting on the ground over here or whatever. And the other monkeys are going to react to that. And that's communication in a whole sense. In a lesser sense, they do also communicate their wants and needs through grooming and social behaviors. So if they got into an altercation with another monkey, let's say they were playing and it got too rough, The monkey that got offended by the play, they're going to kind of pull a sad face, kind of a, and leave and kind of slunk away and sit down somewhere. And then the offender, if they still want to maintain their social relationship with that other monkey, they're going to go over and they're going to start grooming them. And you can tell, you can actually tell by how they start grooming whether they're in a lot of trouble or a little bit of trouble. Because if they're intently grooming and taking a lot of care and being very cautious and nice, they are absolutely in big trouble. If they go over and they just kind of start picking little bits of fur off and sit there for a minute together, they know that it's not a big deal and they're just making nice. So that kind of communication nuance is actually something that when people study monkeys, they may or may not think about as much as they should. That tells us that they have a more robust communication system than what we are typically led to believe. And actually, dialect comes into it. So if you have a monkey that's a member of one troop, and for some reason they're taken out of that troop, out of the area, and they're put into a new area with a new group of monkeys, they may or may not actually be able to do the verbal communications. However, 9 times out of 10, the nonverbal communications stay the same, which shows us a lot about what's inherent to the species and primates in general. We all share a lot of things, even if we're not monkeys. We're still in the order of primate. So we share things like forward-looking eyes. We share things by the fact that we have an expressive mouth area. We have the ability to use our forearms, not just for keeping us on the ground or whatever, because they are mostly quadrupeds and arboreal when they're climbing up in the trees. But when they're on the ground, they can sit on their haunches and they can actually use their hands for different things. And that's actually commonly shared between a lot of primates, and especially, like I said in the beginning of the broadcast, diurnal primates, so primates that are mostly busy during the day and asleep at night, develop a lot of these nonverbal communications because, of course, they can see each other. And this is all kind of comes together at a certain point when we're dealing with humans and human conflict situations or human interactions that become negative or aggressive. As I said earlier, it's 9 times out of 10, it's actually the human's fault for an aggressive behavior interaction with a monkey. Even if you go to a park that's filled with monkeys, there are ways to navigate that and be there without ending up in a danger situation where a monkey's going to want to scratch you or bite you or jump on you or yell at you or anything aggressive. So communication, very important. I'll be doing a video, an actual produced video at some point that'll really dive into long-tail macaque communications. And it kind of takes back into my history because I have a background with the Chimpanzee Human Communications Institute out of Central Washington. I was very, very honored to be able to spend time with Dr. Roger Fouts, and he was the researcher who actually worked with a chimpanzee named Washoe, and Washoe was able to speak American Sign Language with a very, very robust vocabulary. And there were, at the time that I went to the CHCI campus, there were still chimpanzees that they took care of that had been used in the former program for learning ASL, for learning sign language. And I was able to sign with chimpanzees, which was amazing, talking about shoes, and which they like. They like shoes. Who knew? And learning about primate communication in general. So I'll actually talk about that a lot deeper in an upcoming video. And yeah, so that'll kind of cap it off for now. I appreciate your time, and I hope everybody's doing well. Take care.